Hi, Room 12. Back again, and here we are talking about story webs. Now, in your workspace, this is a really important part of your writing. Before we even get started on writing, we need to understand how texts come together and how stories come together. Okay, so there are some really important things that we need to be able to identify in text, so that way we can do that for ourselves and write it for ourselves. So on the screen, you can see that there is an example of a story web, and this is what you're going to be creating yourself. Okay, so if you see the story web, and we've got Little Red Riding Hood, because the story Little Red Riding Hood is quite a common story. Now, if you've never read Little Red Riding Hood before, that's okay. But you can see that there's a lot of information on the screen that's going to help us understand what a story web is, and help us also to identify the main structures of a story. Okay, so if we look here up on the screen, you can see that there are, so the title of the story goes in the center, and then we've also got here the characters. Now, characters tend to be one of the most important parts of any story, but if we look here, Little Red Riding Hood's there, and there's even little descriptions of who Little Red Riding Hood is in terms of the story. Then there's two other characters that we really meet in the story. We don't really meet Grandma, because Grandma gets locked up in the cupboard or gets eaten up by the wolf, depending on which story you read, which version of the story you read. But we've got Little Red Riding Hood, the Big Bad Wolf, and the Woodcutter are your main characters. Okay, and then the setting, which is where the story is taking place, the setting moves. So the setting starts at Little Red Riding Hood's house, and it then goes into the woods where she runs into the Big Bad Wolf, and then ends at Grandma's house, and that's where we meet the Woodcutter as well. Then the story, this is the plot of the story is how the story moves along and how the story progresses. And generally in stories, we tend to have at the beginning a bit of an orientation where we find out about some of the characters. So the orientation in Little Red Riding Hood talks about how Little Red Riding Hood is about to go on a journey to see her grandma and bring her some lovely fruit and preserves and different things like that. Now, the problem tends to be the first thing that we identify in a story. What is the problem? Now, the problem is that the Big Bad Wolf is there. Okay, the Big Bad Wolf is the problem in the story. He's the antagonist, which means he's the bad guy, and so we need to be looking at that as the problem. So the problem is the Big Bad Wolf, and he's hungry. And his response to seeing Little Red Riding Hood is he decides that he's going to eat her. And the action that he's taking is he asks her where she's going, and then as a result runs on ahead when he finds out that she's going to Grandma's house, runs ahead to Grandma's house, and then Little Red Riding Hood finds out when she arrives at Grandma's house that that's what's happened. Okay, that he's gone to the Grandma's house and eaten Grandma or hidden Grandma, and he's actually masquerading as Grandma. So in the action, the process of the action is he asks her where she's going, runs on ahead, and then eventually Little Red Riding Hood screams when she finds out that the wolf is actually not her grandmother. And then the outcome, which is the result of the story, or the resolution, is that the woodcutter rescues Little Red Riding Hood when she screams. Okay, because he hears her when he's walking by or something like that. Now, there is a theme in the story. Now, when you're doing yours, I'm not expecting you to come up with the theme in the story that you're reading. That's not what I'm going to need you to do. The main things that I want you to identify today in your writing, in the writing that you're going to be analyzing, is the characters. I want you to be able to identify all the characters in the story, where the story is taking place or where it might move to, and the plot in terms of the problem, the response, the actions that may have been taken, and what was the outcome, what happened at the end of the story. Okay, so when you do this yourself on your story web activity, those are the things that I want you to be looking at. Now, the text that you're going to be doing it on is this story called The Spinning Chair. Now, I'm not going to read it to you now because it's quite a bit, it's not a long story, but I don't have a huge amount of time when recording these kinds of things. So just have a read through it yourself. If you're struggling with the reading of it yourself, please do get someone to support you and to help you in reading it. Otherwise, give me a shout and I'll try and get a recording for you. Okay. Now, up on the screen, you can see that we have our little basic example